decir. I would like to know, how do you feel like everybody in the world, so many people in the world, are right now so concerned about your health?
Joder.
Está todo el mundo, ¿cómo se siente? ¿Alguien no sabe inglés?
It's a little morbid, actually, but my health is fine. So
No, actually, I'm not asking for your
health. It's very good, but it's still a little unreal to me that the books have become as huge as they have become, and that there are so many people all around the world who are reading them and doing more than just reading them, but also gaming with them, collecting items about the series, of course watching the TV show, dressing up in costumes like some of my characters, and also naming their dogs, cats, and occasionally children after some of my characters. It's all a little unreal. I met actually in Asturias at Celsius, two people brought their babies named after characters. I think there was an Arya and a Daenerys.
Actually, I was asking a little bit more about what you wrote on your blog, not a blog, because you felt a little bit pressure about all this concern about your health, and that's uncomfortable for you, and I understand that. How do you feel about that?
Sí.
I basically feel my not a blog is concerned with a number of things. It's really not meant to be a report on the books or any professional function. I talk about my football games and my travels, and going to conventions and anything in politics and anything that strikes my fancy. Books I've read, movies I've seen, and occasionally something that I'm working on professionally, be it a television, the television show, another television show, the book, my anthologies. So in a sense it is personal, but it's not meant to be deeply personal. I'm addressing, essentially hundreds of thousands of people who are essentially strangers to me. They're not friends or relatives, so there are some areas that are still private and that I don't talk about. So, basically that stuff is not anything I want to discuss.
I would like to know if you use the fire and the ice like yin, yang, and why a song. That's it.
I wouldn't think specifically in terms of yin and yang, which are, of course, Chinese, Asian concepts, but certainly there are a lot of dualities in the novels. Melisandre's whole religion, the Lord of Light, and its contrast between light and darkness, fire and ice, just on the face of it, one is cold, one is heat, etc. The vast disparities of the different landscapes in Westeros. Fire and Ice also as echoes of the poem by Robert Frost, which of course is very well known in English. Not sure how well you know it here in Spain, but Whether the World Wind and Fire or Ice, one of Frost's best, I think. So all of these things are reflected in it. I think some of the best stuff in fiction has multiple meanings and can be read in many different ways, and certainly I'm a fan of that kind of writing and reading.
And did you decide that on the spot?
Well, that's a complicated question. I don't do, as some writers do, complete outlines where everything is figured out ahead of time. I do know the general story arc in broad strokes. I like to compare it to a journey. If we were setting out to drive here from Madrid to Moscow, you would know your ultimate destination. It's a long journey. You would look at a map. You would say, well, I'll take this road and I'll go through France, and then I'll turn right and go through Germany, et cetera, and you'd plan the general thing. But you would not necessarily know where you would stop for dinner on the first day, or what you were going to eat when you stopped for dinner, or where road construction would force you to take a detour, or what sort of interesting hitchhiker you might meet along the way. These would be the adventures that you would discover during the journey. And it's like that with my writing the book. I know the general destination, and I know the main roads which I'm going to take, and in some sense those point of view characters are the main roads, and the main roads are also the main incidents in the story. Things like the Battle of the Blackwater. I always knew there was going to be a Battle of the Blackwater. The Red Wedding. I always knew there was going to be a Red Wedding. But certain things I do discover in the course of writing, and sometimes they surprise me. It's not necessarily the most efficient way of writing. Sometimes I turn down dead ends or find myself hopelessly mired in a swamp, and I have to turn back and rewrite and rip it up and take another direction. But it's the way I've always worked, and it works for me, and I think it produces work that I'm pretty happy with. Other writers will do the plan everything to the last eye before they set out, but to my mind, that would take all the fun out of writing. So I'll stick with my own methods. One thing that should be said here, I mean, Alejo is putting it down to luck, but there's also a fair amount of willingness to publish something based on its literary qualities and not necessarily its perceived commercial success. Believe it or not, I was not always the huge bestseller you see before you. I am one of these cases where it took me 40 years to become an overnight success. And I had, before Gigamesh, I think a half dozen other publishers in Spain who published various of my earlier novels to thunderous silence for the most case, and sales in the high dozens. Now, admittedly, this was not entirely my fault. I mean, I think my novel Fever Dream, which did very well in other countries, did not do well in Spain because it had like the ugliest cover ever put on a book in all of human history. But nonetheless, at the time when Alejo picked me up, it was because a number of other Spanish publishers had dropped me based on the rather poor sales of my earlier books. So sometimes virtue is rewarded. You mean Alan Taylor?
Alan Taylor. Alan Taylor, creador de el lado oeste de la Casa Blanca.
Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin.
Perdón.
Is Adam Sorkin going to direct an episode on this?
No, Adam Sorkin is not directing for our show. He's busy writing and producing for his own show. And unfortunately, Alan Taylor, who I thought you were talking about, is also not directing for season 3. He's been one of our mainstay directors who did great work for us in season 1 and season 2. But unfortunately, he did such great work for us that they hired him to direct Thor 2, which is now shooting in England. So we have lost Alan Taylor for season 3. But we wish him good luck. He's a magnificent director. And he did some of our best episodes. David Benioff and Dan Weiss are directing an episode together for season 3, team directors, which is a bit unusual. It's the first time either of them has directed. So I guess they figured just writing 7 of the episodes and producing the show and being the showrunners and dealing with the network and the studio was not enough, so they should direct as well. So we wish them luck. But I am not so foolish. I am not directing an episode this season, or indeed, I think any other season. I'll stick to the writing side of the equation. Yes, I'm still aiming to do it in 7 books. The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring. Mind you, those are both huge books. I expect both of them to be like 1,500, 1,600 pages in manuscript, which is what Dance with Dragons was, and Storm of Swords before it, the longest books in the series. So it's about 3,000 more pages to write. A fairly healthy day's work, I think. But that's still my hope. But the operative word there, of course, is hope. I make no guarantees anymore. I've been wrong too often about too many things, so I'm writing nothing in blood. This is just my best estimate. This is my goal. This is my intention. Ultimately, though, while there's a nice resonance to 7 kingdoms, 7 gods, 7 books, it's really one story. The number of books is almost irrelevant. It's a story which has a beginning, a middle, and yes, an end. And I do know what that end will be, and the fates of the principal characters. I love all my characters. That being said, some of them are better behaved than others. You know, I sometimes talk about my characters as my children, and you know, some children are well-behaved little children, and others are a handful. Tyrion is my favorite character. He's always been the easiest to write, which doesn't mean he's safe. No one is safe. And there really is no character that I hate. I mean, some of the characters who might be considered nasty pieces of work, or who have done very despicable things, like Theon, say, or Victorian Greyjoy, are nonetheless interesting characters to write about. The hardest character to write has always been Bran. I think principally because he's the youngest character, and I really have to get my head around writing from the viewpoint of when he began, he was I believe 7 years old. So getting at the head of a 7-year-old when I don't actually have a 7-year-old running around to observe, although I do remember being one at one point, so I have to try to think back to that. But it's a challenge to write from the viewpoint of a small child who may witness events without truly understanding what is happening. So you have to really kind of look at every sentence and say, okay, here's what's happening, but how does he see them, and what words would he know? What would be his perception of this situation and tailor the voice to that of a young boy. But I do love Bran, but he is hard to write. Those chapters are difficult. It's also the fact that he's probably the character most involved in magic. And magic is something, it's a required element of the fantasy, I think. You need fantasy in a magic, but if you handle the magic badly, it can destroy the fantasy. And I think a lot of fantasy is in fact destroyed by magic that is handled sloppily or there's simply too much of it and it overwhelms the book. So I try to use magic very sparingly and very carefully, and Bran has more of it than anyone else, so he's in the midst of that. I'm very dubious of all these new technologies. I think we need to go back to tying messages to the legs of ravens. That works very well. Why do we need Twitter? I don't get it. The raven will get there eventually. And, you know, ravens need work too. You know, there are actually 2 video games on the market, and there are 2 more in the works. And I have to admit that I can't speak with any expertise about them. I'm not a video gamer myself. I mean, I have played a few video games, of course, but most of them decades ago. And it wasn't that I did not enjoy playing the video games. It was that I found that I enjoyed playing them too much. You would probably have like 2 or 3 more novels from me if I had not discovered video games. You know, particularly I played a lot of Sid Meier video games at one time. Civilization and Pirates and Railroad Tycoon. You know, those probably cost me a couple novels. So I decided I'd better stop playing video games. But there are other people who love playing video games, and I received these offers to do Westeros in the thing in the form of one video game or another, and you know, I entertain them, and I've done a couple licenses. The games that are coming out are actually HBO licenses. They're based on the TV show rather than on the games, on the books. I have a rather complex relationship with HBO in regard to this area of merchandising. I'm not sure it's anything that any of you really care about, but typically when you have a TV show, all the merchandising belongs to the studio. But because my books had pre-existed and I'd already had a number of merchandising sales in place, HBO and I had to structure a very complicated deal where, you know, certain areas they controlled and certain areas I controlled because they already existed, and other areas we both could do merchandising. So, for example, there are 2 Ice and Fire calendars. There's the HBO calendar, which has pictures of the actors, and there's the Ice and Fire calendar that I publish with Random House that has original artwork by artists that I select and work with to capture various scenes from the books. So a book product and a game product, or a show product. And that same thing is true of the video game situation. We have a couple video games based on the books, and now we have a couple video games coming out that'll be based on the show. And all I can say is they look good to me, but I'm not an expert, and I hope that the people who do play video games enjoy them. Well, I have a book that I'm working on that's a concordance and history of Westeros. It's called the World of Ice and Fire, and I'm working on that with Elio Garcia and Linda Antonsen, who run the Westeros website. They've been fans of the series since the beginning, and they've established this wonderful website and forum, and I think they actually know more about Westeros than I do. So they've compiled every mention in all of the books and the associated stories, put together who's who and a chronology and all of that history, and I'm expanding it and adding to it and filling in. So there may be some more material in that about the Children of the Forest and the First Men. There will certainly be what's in the books will be encapsulated, and I may do some expansions. I don't think I'm going to ever write any novels during that period, if that's your question. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee that. Who the hell knows what I want to write in 10 years? But first I have to finish Ice and Fire, and that's going to take me quite a few years, and we'll see what I do next. The Tolkien question, you know, it's a great compliment. J.R.R. Tolkien was one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. Lord of the Rings is the mountain that all other fantasy labors in the shadow of. It redefined fantasy. It created fantasy as a modern publishing genre. Virtually all fantasy that has followed it owes something to Tolkien. Even the writers who are consciously reacting against Tolkien are, in that sense, influenced by Tolkien. So to be compared to him for fantasists, there's no greater compliment. Well, we have discussions. I wouldn't necessarily call them arguments, but sometimes we have different point of views. For example, in the casting process, you know, we will look at a role opens up, and our casting director will bring in 20 actors for the role, having already looked at probably a couple hundred actors and performed the first culling themselves, and we'll get to see tapes of the 20 finalists that will be put up on the website. And I'll look at them, and David and Dan will look at them, and then we'll discuss who we like and who we don't like, and we don't always like the same person, so we do have discussions like that. But I would not call those arguments. It's just part of standard process that goes on all the time in television and film, which is, you know, basically a collaborative medium. And it's even hard to say. I mean, in writing the books, of course, I have the final word about everything. I am the producer and the director and the casting director and the set decorator and the special effects guy and the actors and etc. That's not the case in any television show. David Benioff and Dan Weiss as the showrunners are probably the closest thing that we have to a final voice there. But even they can be overruled by HBO, say, which is supplying the money. The guy who supplies the money always has a lot to say about things when you're talking about $50-60 million, especially. So there are discussions, not arguments. These days, when I go outside, people are recognizing me and you know, stopping me on the street and taking photographs and asking for my autograph and all that, and it can be a little much. So, because there are a lot of them. So sometimes when I want to move anonymously, I just take off my hat, and then no one recognizes who I am.
Espero que él tampoco.
I write them that way too. I don't write the chapters in the order in which you read the chapters. I get in a groove and we'll write 3 or 4 Tyrion chapters in a row, and then I'll switch gears and write 3 or 4 Arya chapters, etc., etc. And yes, I do miss science fiction and intend to write some more of it one of these days. I love science fiction. I grew up reading science fiction, fantasy, horror, which we called monster stories, and I love all those genres. I like to do different things. It just so happens that this thing that I'm doing is a really, 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 really big thing. Boy, when I finish a book, I feel a great sense of relief that I've actually finished a book. You know, it's a tough process. I have great days where I love what I'm doing. I have bad days where I despair that the book will ever be finished or will ever be any good. I think most writers are emotional like that and swing between the two extremes. What was the rest of it?
Actually, I can't remember.
No, they're not. I mean, the characters I draw from a number of sources, but I don't do roman en clef. I mean, there's no one who's directly based on anyone from real life or history. But I do draw from history. I do draw from people I know. I do draw from people in the news or you know, great figures of the world that I've read about in history books or in biographies. For the viewpoint characters, of course, I also draw extensively on myself. I mean, that's the only person that you ever really, really know is yourself. Not to get all existential on you here, but I think a writer has to really reach inward to make a character come to life, and that's true for all of the viewpoint characters, whether they're very heroic and noble ones or whether they're, you know, terrible, horrible ones. You know, we all have, I think, the capacity in us to be heroes and villains and angels and demons, and I certainly do, as well as anyone else, and I try to use that stuff to make my characters come alive. Actually, well, Dying of the Light, if that's what you're referring to, my first novel did not win the Nebula. It was nominated for the Hugo and lost. It may have won. No, I don't think it won the Locust Poll either. But I mean, that's almost beside the point. You're speaking, those two things are two awards in the worlds of science fiction and fantasy. The Nebula Award given by the Science Fiction Writers of America, the Locust Award given by the readers of Locust Magazine, and I have won both of them for various other works in the past. I've also won the Hugo Award and the World Fantasy Award and the World Horror Award and, you know, many other awards. And, you know, it's nice to win awards. But you have to take it with a grain of salt. Ultimately, they make the writer feel good. Sometimes when you lose, they make you feel bad. They can have a positive impact on your sales, which is always good because that helps you pay your mortgage and buy toy soldiers for your collection, which is what I spend all my money on. But they can't be confused with literary quality. I mean, what awards did Tolkien win? You know, what awards did Shakespeare win? They may have won something, I don't know, but you know, whether or not Shakespeare had a trophy or two on his shelf is not what made his work last for centuries. The story makes its own demand, and the story is what's important. As for what I value more, there's a certain value to all of it, but ultimately you have to please yourself. I think at one point on my Nada blog a couple of years ago, when some of my detractors were getting to me a little bit, I put up embedded a YouTube video of Ricky Nelson singing his great song "Garden Party," which has the lyric, "You can't please everyone, so you've got to please yourself." And ultimately, that's what it is. I've never written a book that has pleased everyone. I have written, by and large, I've been very, very lucky in my life. My books have been very well reviewed, but there's always a bad review or two. My books have sold, by and large, very well, and lately extraordinarily well, but there are still people who don't like them. But that's true of everything. I look around and there are people who don't like The Great Gatsby. There are people who don't like Shakespeare or Dickens or Tolstoy. Name the book and you'll find someone who says, it's overrated, it's no good. So, I think it's a mistake for any writer to obsess on, oh my God, I've got to please everyone here. Listen to what the fans are saying. You tell your story as best you can. You put all your heart and soul and blood and sweat into it, and you do it to the best you can and with all the power of your craft. And you hope it finds an audience, and you hope it finds a contemporary audience that will buy your books and enable you to keep writing because you'll have an income. And you hope that the books will still be read 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, when, if they are still being read, college professors will be arguing about whether they're any good or not. So that's sort of the attitude I take, and I think it's the only sane attitude for any writer to take.
Thank you.